What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man in the corner, coming live from Las Vegas, Nevada, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, well, they're in the playoffs, but things are brutal right now. Rough isn't even a word. It is. I mean, there are a lot of adjectives you can use. None of them are very good. None of them make you feel better on this Monday morning, but we're going to dive into where the Pittsburgh Steelers are, where they could be, any faith left in a playoff run or at least a playoff victory. Meanwhile, we got to talk Russell Wilson. We got to talk George Pickens, and we have to talk Adam Schefter dropping that. Well, Mike Tomlin might get some trade calls this offseason, and I mean, I think everybody can assume our thoughts on that, but we will obviously addressed the situation. It's a little early for you this morning, but hey, dude, the city of sin, it never sleeps. So apparently neither do you. How you feel, my friend?
Yeah, I'm feeling all right. I've had a lot of late podcast recordings. This might be the earliest in the morning that I've ever recorded a podcast. But hey, them's be the rules whenever you want to go to Vegas for a week.
That's what they say, dude. Donnie Droon used to shout out Donnie Droon, the original, the OG, way back in the day. I mean, I sucked. Donnie was good. Used to wake up every single Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5 a.m. to record this podcast. It was wild. And he always, the craziest part, again, shout out Donnie. I'm going to give him his flowers here. Like, never, ever. We would be finished. And I'd be like, oh, what you got going on this morning? He's like, I'm going back to bed. I'm like, you're crazy, bro. You are crazy. So I'm glad I'll be there in 12-ish hours or so, something like that, heading down for the SI Person of the Year awards. So very excited. I did not win the award, but you know, it really, if you chalk it up, Simone Biles, Noah Strackbine, we were probably neck and neck. Let's talk some Pittsburgh Steelers. They lose to the Cincinnati Bengals in a game that the scoreboard, I don't think, described how far away this game actually was. 19-17, an opportunity at the end of this one for Russell Wilson to put a stamp on his downfall and say, we're back, we're alive, we have all the momentum. Everybody, myself included, who spent the entire game writing the Pittsburgh Steelers are in trouble right now story, watched that game and went, I'm going to have to scrap this. This thing's going to have to go away. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to have to talk about how a 2-minute drill gave some light, because that's exactly what it would have done. We would have woke up Sunday morning thrilled that the Pittsburgh Steelers are heading to Houston. They got out of their losing streak. It wasn't pretty, but I mean, hell, a 20-19 victory doesn't look that bad. The defense held Joe Burrow and company to under 20 points, and the offense put 20-plus points up. That's all you're asking for in an NFL game. Would have looked good. Instead, Russell Wilson completes a pass behind the line of scrimmage. His next one is incomplete. George Pickens drops a pass, which we'll dive into George in a little while here. And Russ decides to run, knock it out of bounds, and he ends it off with an incompletion to Pat Freiermuth over the middle with about 15 seconds left in the ballgame. It was another example of, man, the Steelers keep falling, and they just can't seem to get back up. I'll ask you point blank 2 questions. I think that's how we start this show off. Is this rock bottom for the Pittsburgh Steelers? And is this the end of any talk, any thoughts of Russell Wilson returning in 2025?
You have a hard time believing it's not rock bottom. I mean, they've gone 10-7 once again. They are widely considered the weakest team in the entire playoff field right now going into the postseason. They have to go up against a Baltimore Ravens team that embarrassed them a couple weeks ago. Their offense looks horrendous, and this will be probably the first of several times I'll say this today. The one silver lining is the defense looked to be able to have figured it out. They looked pretty good. They weren't perfect. They still had their issues, but you hold Joe Burrow the way he's currently playing, under 20 points, I think you're calling that a successful game. Even if T. Higgins missed most of the game, even if you did leave Corey Trice on an island with Jamar Chase most of the game, which is coaching malpractice. But I think outside of that, it's pretty close to rock bottom for the Steelers.
Yeah, I don't disagree. This is where the Steelers' downfall hits a point where if you lose to Baltimore, it's expected. and you're no longer sitting here going, it can't get any worse. No, it can't. It's worse. This is the worst it can possibly get for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now they head into the offseason. I mean, obviously they have a playoff game, and we'll dive into our confidence in them in a little while here. But they head into a playoff game where things are rough. And if they shock the world, awesome. Fantastic. But that's what they'd have to do at this point, is shock the world. They'd have to go into Baltimore, win a game against potentially the hottest team in the entire NFL, and say, we're here, we're back, we're fine. This is going to be okay. We hit a skid, but we figured it out. I think this is about rock bottom. You can only go up from here. Hopefully the Steelers don't coast it out into the offseason, and instead they try to figure it out. I'll say this. The locker room was pretty fired up, like pretty to a point where it was like, okay, this is either got to end. Even Russ had some emotion. This is either got to end, or we got to figure it out. And we're no longer sitting around saying, oh, we'll be okay. No, they understand they're not going to be okay. They have to do something about it. And even Russ, I mean, asked about George Pickens, had a little bit of fire in him, saying things like, I believe in, cutting the question off, I believe in George. All right, that's great. I don't think anybody else at this point really believes in anybody. So it's good to hear Russ kind of avoid the normal questions, the normal responses, the media trained, this is Russell Wilson, this is what he says because this is what he's supposed to say, answers, and give you something real. That was good to see. I think it lit a fire. I think the Steelers have a fire. I don't think the Steelers' solution is fire-based. I don't think it's, they just have to get some pep in their step. No, I think they genuinely have issues that are emerging, that have reached the surface, and they can no longer solve them. I mean, they built this entire team off of running the football successfully. They're running the football successfully at a just above average rate. It's just good enough to be considered successful, and it's not enough to carry a franchise to the Super Bowl, which is what the Pittsburgh Steelers wanted to do. For 3 games, Najee Harris looked like the guy that could do that for the Steelers. At this point, nobody on the ground looks like they could do that for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have no passing game, and now George Pickens has the drops, and you're wondering what's going on there. And their defense, awesome. They figured it out. They held Joe Burrow to 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and under 20 points, only for everybody to be reminded what it's like to have an offense that can't score 20. And that's where the Steelers are. I don't think this is, you got to get things moving. I think this is, the issues have hit a peak. The Van Jefferson is your wide receiver 2, yet he's almost useless. Your wide receiver 1 has the drops and you have nobody to turn to. Your 36-year-old Super Bowl winning quarterback that you signed and started and benched Justin Fields for was supposed to not turn the ball over, not have mistakes, be able to lead this team in crucial moments. He can't do any of those things. He had 51 yards heading into the 4th quarter on Saturday. 51 yards heading into the 4th quarter. And even on days where your defense is good, Chris Boswell can't win you every game, especially if your offense isn't giving them the opportunities. So that's where the Steelers are. Again, I don't think that it's fire-based. You got to just step up and do it. I think this is much more than that, actual problems. And I don't know if they're solvable in a week. It's unfortunate, but I think the Steelers' nightmares have come true. And that's where we sit with the Pittsburgh Steelers, is all the issues you've avoided, ignored, we've tried to talk ourselves into have come to the surface, and they are just not built to be as successful as they once were thought to be this season. Headlining that, Russell Wilson, which is the biggest topic of conversation right now. Everybody wants to talk Russ. Mike Tomlin was asked if he considered putting Justin Fields in and said no. He did not. He thinks it's everybody. It is everybody. George Pickens drops the football. Najee Harris gets hurt. Jaylen Warren's not really doing much. Van Jefferson, I mean, the epitome of Van Jefferson's season came down to a comeback route where he didn't come back. He just turned around and stood there. And when the ball went incomplete, every single person went, that's a first down if you take 1 step forward. If you step forward 1 yard, it's still a first down on a crucial 3rd down. And all you have to do is move. But you didn't do it because that's Van Jefferson's season tied into 1 play. That's where we're at. That's where the Steelers are. And I get it. It is everybody. But maybe the guy that's stepping up, maybe the guy that is supposed to be the guy that brings everybody back to the surface and gets everybody together is not doing his job, and that's Russell Wilson. And I don't know if you change Russell Wilson right now. I don't think you make a quarterback change going into the playoffs, although teams have done it and they've been successful doing it. I still don't think the Steelers would consider it. We'll find out at noon when Mike Tomlin addresses the media, but I doubt it. What I do know is if the Pittsburgh Steelers bring Russell Wilson back next season, they have messed up miserably, because this is no longer Russ is the best option, even if that option is not a good option. Yeah, you spend $40 million on Russell Wilson because, your only other option is Sam Darnold or Justin Fields, and you can make that a better bridge quarterback. Russell Wilson might not be a all-pro quarterback right now, but he probably gives you the best shot at a Super Bowl next season. None of those things are true anymore. Russell Wilson does not give you an opportunity at a Super Bowl. He is not the best quarterback available. I don't think he's top 3 best quarterbacks available this offseason. At one point, he was 2. But now, you take a flyer on Justin Fields before you re-sign Russell Wilson. I don't know if that's what the Steelers do, but that's what you should do. That's what every team should do. There will be teams out there, the Tennessee Titans, who now have the number 1 pick in the draft, they're probably going to get a quarterback. The Raiders, the Giants, maybe the Browns, any of these teams who need a quarterback, they're going to take a flyer on Justin Fields 10 times before they look at Russell Wilson and say he is the solution here. That's what he's done. That's what Russ has done. And I think the 2-minute drill, you could look at 51 passing yards going into the fourth quarter. And I know I'm going on a rant here, but I think the 2-minute drill where you clearly saw Russell Wilson didn't manage this correctly. He didn't do this well enough. And we all talked, Justin Fields had a pass bounce off his face mask and he looked brutal in that 2-minute drill against Indianapolis. I agree. It looked just as bad for Russell Wilson trying to beat a bad Cincinnati defense and getting a first down in the process, which should have given you at least an opportunity. But I think he failed miserably. And at this point, it's just not realistic. It's not logical. It makes more sense to say, hey, we have to admit at some point we just don't have Ben anymore and we got to figure it out, than it does to say Russ is the answer. You have to sign Russell Wilson and he gives us our best opportunity. I think if you draft a rookie quarterback, even if that rookie quarterback's not good, it's a step forward compared to a baseline, which is where you are with Russell Wilson. And I don't think that baseline is good enough to even win a playoff game, let alone give you an opportunity for a Super Bowl. I don't think the Steelers can re-sign Russell Wilson. I'm sure they're thinking about it. I would imagine that thought process has changed drastically since 4 weeks ago or even 2 weeks ago. I think that thought process for the Steelers has changed. But I don't think that at this point you could do it. And I would be almost surprised if the Steelers ended up paying him a big contract going into the offseason, because I just don't think he deserves one at 2-5, 2-4 against winning football teams this season. Do you agree? Disagree?
No, I have to agree. If we rewind to last year, whenever they lost in Buffalo, the call was for the Steelers just to improve at quarterback. I don't think we can say that they have with this version of Russell Wilson. Head-up comparison, Russell Wilson, weeks 15 to 18 versus what we saw from Mason Rudolph last year. Mason was better, and it's not particularly close. I'm not going to say the entire quarterback room isn't better, because I do like the combination of Russ and Fields. I think gives you more potential, but I think what you've seen this year is Russell Wilson start off hot against some bad teams, have his defense and his ability to manage a game get him a victory over the Ravens. And outside of that, not really impressed. He was great against a bad Cincinnati defense, but the way that he is just kind of shut down, and we all understand, you mentioned the caveats earlier, offensive line, dropped passes, but in the opportunities for Russell Wilson to make an impact in that game, a positive impact, scrambling, has a chance to get out of bounds and maintain that timeout, Instead, he stays in bounds and then gets sacked the next play. And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
even if Pat catches that ball, I don't know if they have time to get up to the ball and spike it.
No.
With all of these factors in tow, I mean, you can't bring him back. I think we've seen in the league that you're better off taking a shot on a young guy. And fortunately for the Steelers, they have that young guy and he's been in the system for a year. I mean, I know it's not a good day to bring this up, but look at the Minnesota Vikings. They thought they were a decent quarterback away from being a contending team. They went out and got Sam Darnold, who people still thought saw ghosts. And now I understand they're a 5 seed, but they're a 14-3 5 seed going into the playoffs and expected to be very tough out.
Yeah.
Steelers have that guy, I think, in Fields. And I think that when you look at that and when you see and match it with what Russ has done this year, especially late, I don't know how you come back to Wilson after that.
No, I look at it simply like Justin Fields is not a guaranteed franchise quarterback anywhere he goes. And he's not going to get the opportunity to be a franchise quarterback in 2025. But at bare minimum, if he's your bridge quarterback and you view him as such, which is how the Steelers should approach it, it sucks to waste a draft pick on a guy that may never see the field in your franchise. It sucks to do that. But the Steelers may be in a situation where re-signing Justin Fields and drafting a quarterback as early as they can, where it makes sense. You know, you don't want to take a first-round pick on a third-round quarterback, but you could find the formula that works. Having them compete and looking at the younger option as the guy that should develop into the starter makes so much sense right now. It gives Justin an opportunity to prove himself. If he does prove himself, if he is a stud, then he's your franchise quarterback for the next 10 years. And at that point, he's 36 years old. Awesome. If he's not, if he's average, what'd you miss out on? Nothing. You didn't miss out on anything. You gave up on a 36-year-old quarterback that we are learning more and more in this league as the years go on, that it doesn't hold up the way that everybody thought it was going to hold up. 5 years ago, it was quarterbacks are playing forever. Forever. You're getting Tom Brady playing into his 40s, Peyton Manning, all these guys playing forever, and they're still so good. Now we're starting to realize this is the season where you're starting to realize, yeah, okay, I get it. There were a couple. It's not all of them. At some point, everybody falls off a cliff. Maybe Russell Wilson's falling off that cliff. And I just think that's a better option. It'll be a cheaper option, although Russ definitely lost himself some money. It'll be a cheaper option. It'll be a younger option. It'll be an option that may, if it works out, is 4 or 5 times better than if it works out with Russell Wilson. If it works out with Russell Wilson, you get 1 good year, maybe 2, to say we could compete for a Super Bowl. If it works out for Justin Fields, you get 10. And right now, the baseline of, it doesn't work out is exactly the same. The only difference is maybe you could trade Justin Fields for a mid-round draft pick at some point because he's still only going to be 28 and maybe somebody gets hurt at some point and you could just ditch your quarterback for something. And I'm not saying that's likely. I'm just saying that's where the floors are. You have to. You have to get rid of Russell Wilson after the season. You can't bring him back. And I think Justin Fields is the answer, or at least is the answer to be the bridge. But I wouldn't, if you just scrapped it clean and said we're starting over, I mean, it's better than re-signing Russell Wilson. Anything is better than re-signing Russell Wilson at this point in time, simply because you're going to overpay for a guy that doesn't deserve another contract with you, and that's where the Steelers are. Now, will they? I think that he may have lost himself that opportunity in these last 4 games, and if he looks bad in Baltimore, I got a hard time thinking Mike Tomlin, who probably will advocate for Russell Wilson, could walk into a meeting with Omar Khan and Art Rooney and say, we bring Russ back. And both of them look at him and say, that's a good idea. I have a hard time believing there wouldn't be some pushback saying, I don't think that's where we go about this. And if Arthur Smith's staying, I bet you anything that he makes a push for Justin Fields over Russell Wilson this offseason. All right. Speaking of Mike Tomlin, this is the next part of this one. Yesterday, Adam Schefter jumped on, and man, let me tell you, let's start with this one. Got a couple of them wrong because Gerard Mayo lasted about 15 seconds after his post-game press conference before he got fired, which was the fastest firing I've ever witnessed. And there seems to be a couple more that Adam Schefter said is safe that didn't end up being safe. What he did say is Mike Tomlin might be a guy that teams are looking at, and they may call the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is not new to the Pittsburgh Steelers, for a potential trade for their head coach. Now, we'll start by saying this. They would never, the Steelers would not trade Mike Tomlin. It would not, probably could not happen. I think if you are a team calling about Mike Tomlin, you're not expecting more than maybe a 10-second phone call. Hey, is Mike Tomlin? No? Okay, sounds good. That's it. You're probably not even going to get to finish your question. But I'm sure that there will be some conversations, a number of phone calls, and there will be teams looking for Mike Tomlin. I think it's more of a conversation to ask, what would that package be for you as the Pittsburgh Steelers to say, okay, maybe we'll think about it. Now, again, with the full understanding, this is not realistic. It's just a fun little practice of what would be the compensation for a Mike Tomlin.
Obviously, you'd love a first, you'd love a second,
Yeah.
But again, to keep it within the realm of possibility, I think you're looking for a third round pick. Again, that's if I'm the Steelers right now, because if I'm the Steelers, I'm looking at Mike Tomlin and I'm looking at this situation, and we all can see this. He's a great head coach, but he has not been a good in-game head coach for years.
Okay.
He still has value on the open market, but I think the Steelers need a change. You're probably not going to get a first or a second. You're not. That teams just value those picks way too much. I think I'm looking at it and saying, if you want this head coach that everybody in the league still values as a top head coach, I want a third round pick for him. And I think that is my bar, because I don't think you can expect more than that. And I don't think that you can take anything less, to be completely honest. Now, I do think that they need a new voice in there, but I think you're looking at a third round pick. I think that's where their conversation begins and ends.
Okay. Does this change your mind at all? John Payton went for a first, second, and a third.
No. Wait.
I think it does. I think Mike Tomlin's top 10 pick territory.
I think it helps that he just signed that extension. So when you're getting him in the trade, you're getting him with a little bit of stability, not like Tomlin is one to leave anywhere he's at.
I think Tomlin, now again, this won't happen, but I think if I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars, I would actually call and say, I'll give you the 5th pick in the NFL draft for Mike Tomlin. I'm not going to give you much more than that, maybe a third the next year, but I'll give you the 5th pick in the draft, because what do the Jacksonville Jaguars need more than anything? A head coach. They got a quarterback. They got a running back. They got some wide receivers. Defense could use some work, and the offensive line could use some work, but what they need is a head coach. And Mike Tomlin is probably not viewed as the best head coach in the NFL right now, but I bet you other organizations view Mike Tomlin much differently than me and you do, and probably most other people in Pittsburgh. And I bet you they're very high on who he is. Now, again, I don't think this would ever in a million years happen, but if the Jacksonville Jaguars called me and I'm Art Rooney or Omar Khan or whoever, said, we'll give you the 5th pick in the draft, I think I'm considering it. I do think I'm considering it. I think there's a shot that one of those quarterbacks fall to you with the 5th pick in the draft, because I think Russ could end up somewhere. I don't think Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward are the quarterbacks that everybody think they are. And as this draft goes on, I think it could turn more and more into a Kenny Pickett type draft instead of a, last year type draft where you have to go quarterback 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, whenever they are available. And I think with the 5th pick in the draft, you might be able to pull it off. And then you get like the 26th, 27th pick in the draft where you could do something crazy. Or you could do something wild with both of them, trade to the middle, get Jalen Milroe, and feel pretty confident about where you're at, on top of probably adding another very early pick either this year or next year. Again, it won't happen. But in a fantasy, I am the GM / owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I wouldn't be surprised if that is a phone call that was made to say, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, the Denver Broncos do some crazy things, but I bet you the Jacksonville Jaguars are pretty desperate to get a head coach right now. And with Trevor Lawrence, especially after his contract extension, I don't think they're sitting around going, let's just wait it out and see if we could get, whoever, when they're not even interviewing. I think it's a possibility that they call No, not that it happens. It would never happen. Mike Tomlin's not getting traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers. But at the same time, it's fun to think. And I bet you more calls come this year than any other year that we've had this wild conversation about Mike Tomlin going anywhere. And watch for Florio, because I bet you in the next 48 hours, Mike Tomlin's destined to go to every team in the NFL that could possibly use a head coach. All right, we'll finish off our agenda here by talking playoff confidence. And I have just a very straightforward question for you. Do you have any? Do you have any confidence the Pittsburgh Steelers can pull this one off against the Baltimore Ravens?
There's a little part of me that always remembers the way the Steelers play against Baltimore and say, okay, you know what? I am more confident than I would be originally after watching that game. I mean, I spent over 19 hours on planes or in an airport yesterday, and that was still less painful than watching the Steelers offense on Saturday night. So that has dropped my confidence a lot, but still, it's Baltimore. It's the playoffs. It's the third time you're playing a division rival. So I think that with that and the Steelers defense playing up to Joe Burrow and that Cincinnati Bengals offense, it gives me a little bit of hope that if the defense can kind of bring the Ravens offense down into the muck, maybe they can squeak one out. Now, with that said, if I had to put a percentage on it, I'm still putting it around 20 to 25. And I think that makes me an optimist in the city of Pittsburgh right now. But I do think that there is still a little glimmer of hope. And it helps that, I mean, I got out here, met my friend who's a Ravens fan, and he said, man, I wanted to face anybody but you. I said, you're the only person in the world that's saying that. But he said, no, it's Steelers Ravens. So yeah, there's that.
I agree. I think if the Steelers went to Houston right now, they'd lose. I don't think they're good enough to beat the Houston Texans. I think Baltimore, again, like you said, you never know. You just never know. And that's where the Steelers' hope lies, is in this is the NFL and this is Steelers Ravens. You never know what's going to happen. And because of that, the Steelers have to have some confidence. They have to figure it out somehow. I don't know how. I think this is a different Ravens team than teams past. And the way they look is crazy. But at the same time, something very important to remember here. The Ravens are on a 4-game win streak where they look good, and they beat the Steelers, the Giants, and the Cleveland Browns during that 4-game win streak. That's not impressive. If the Steelers did that, we would be downplaying this winning streak, saying, they didn't really beat anybody. They haven't really. We were trying to do it with Washington. And Washington is, they're an 11-win football team heading into the postseason. So I think there's that to latch onto, to just, if you're trying to create hope, if you're trying to understand the whole thing and really lay the whole picture out, the Steelers are on a 4-game losing streak to the Eagles, the Ravens, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the desperate to make the playoffs Cincinnati Bengals. And the Ravens, they've beat 3 teams that outside of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and if you look at it in context, including the Pittsburgh Steelers, are not very good right now. On top of the last one was Bailey Zappi, who and a Cleveland Browns team that if they won that game, Kevin Stefanski might get fired. He might follow the Gerard Mayo, why did you do this to us? Why would you win this game and blow the 3rd pick in the draft? I guess the 2nd pick in the draft now. Maybe the 3rd. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. It's not a very good winning streak. And they look impressive numbers-wise. Lamar's historical right now. But I think if you're going to look at it and really lay out the details, it's not as crazy as it seems. And that should give the Pittsburgh Steelers some hope. Now, I'm right there with you, 20-25% chance. And I think it's more the Steelers' destruction than the Ravens' glamour right now. It's Pittsburgh does not look like a team that's capable of winning at all. And it doesn't matter who this is the dance. I would expect a 5-game losing streak if they were playing the Ravens in the regular season in week 19 or whatever. That's how I view this. I don't believe it's very optimal for the Steelers, very optimistic that they're going to pull this out, or I'm not very optimistic that they're going to pull this out. But I do think that the Ravens are a less scary team than they are believed to be by almost everybody. And that should give some hope.
Now, it also helps that the forecast as of right now is more snow in the DMV this weekend, which should help when it comes to kind of slowing down Lamar Jackson, at least at a little bit of a pace, because we've talked about it on this episode. You can't slow down the Steelers' offensive passing game more than they already have. So it should be an equalizer and kind of the other end of that George Pickens quote after the Snow Bowl against the Browns. Well, I think the snow helped them. The Steelers are going to need the snow to help them because I think they need everything to go in their favor to be able to take down the Ravens, especially considering the way that this offense has looked for the last 4 weeks.
I agree. I'm not super confident that the Steelers are able to run the ball successfully enough to do something in the snow, and that I have that much confidence in this team, especially the offensive line. But I do think that I hear where you're coming from, and that is like okay, well, at least it's not Lamar versus Russ. That's if you're going to put it in the hands, defense versus defense. All right, there's a shot. Let's battle it out. See who wins. But I agree. That being said, snow in the DMV, man, I gotta could we not get snowed in Baltimore? That would be awesome. Actually, that's
I mean, as long as you make it to Baltimore this time.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Not in the snow. Not in the snow. Fantastic. All right. With that said, we're going to start diving into all your questions. That's everything on our agenda. But first, we're going to take a quick break here from our boys over at DraftKings. Hey, football fans, there's only a few short weeks left in the season, and we've got some exciting wildcard games to look forward to. Get in on the action right now with my partners at DraftKings Sportsbook. They're offering all new customers $200 in bonus bets instantly after betting just $5. Don't let this slip away. Download the DraftKings app now and sign up using our code ALLSTEELERS. The crown is yours. Stay in the action and use your $200 in bonus bets on DraftKings same-game parlays for a shot at an even bigger payout. Combine multiple bets together from the same game. Love the thrill of betting? DraftKings has got you covered. Bet live on in-progress games right as they happen, making watching the game that much more exciting. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code ALLSTEELERS and bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code ALLSTEELERS only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Shout out our boys over at DraftKings Sportsbook. I don't know if it's a plow for the first time in the history of Pittsburgh or what's going on. If somebody just rammed into my house, but as that was going on, 3 loud bangs happened. I mean, it's coming from the front, so I don't think it's like downstairs. I don't think we have a Halloween issue going on, but I'm very curious to know what's happening outside of my house in Highland Park right now. Well, I mean, we'll see, but I just hope that, not the truck. I got to go to the airport.
Yeah, I was about to say, we got to get to the end of this episode. You need to get on the airport. You need to join me in, it should be sunny, not that hot, but sunny Las Vegas.
Yeah, I looked at the weather and all it said was like 50 degrees. And I was like, that is beautiful. That is so nice. It was 19 degrees in the city of Pittsburgh walking. My hand froze to the tripod doing the walk over. And I mean, I don't recommend it for anybody. All right. We're diving into all of your questions. We'll end the show the same way we do every single day. So make sure you're tossing them in the chat. We'll get to all of them before we head out of here. Nick, what do we got?
Yeah, let's kick it off with Jackson, who says, is our O-line that bad, or is Russ just too short and can't move unless it's in shotgun?
I think it might be both, but if you're sitting on a seesaw, the one that's weighing it down more is the offensive line. They're really bad. I mean, Dan Moore has regressed, and that sucks to say, but Dan Moore has regressed. Broderick Jones still hasn't found his stride. Mason McCormick's hurt now, but before that, he was not playing well. Zach Frazier looks like a rookie. Isaac Seumalo looks like a veteran that at times is like, I'm playing with 4 people who are not capable of playing with me, and that's where they're at. But I think Russ is having some mobility issues, is having some awareness issues, but at the same time, that offensive line looks really bad. Really, really bad right now.
Let's go over to Sam, who says, Noah, how much does the offensive sophomore slumps for Broderick Jones and Calvin Austin and rookie exhaustion contribute to this Canada-like record? Are we confident for next year's sophomore class?
I don't know how confident I am. I never judge a rookie class until 3 years in. You can't judge a rookie class until 3. You have no idea what these guys look like. None. That's the whole like, oh, Roman Wilson stinks. We got 2 more years to know if Roman Wilson's going to be good. That's what happens all the time. Sophomore slumps are a real thing. Bounce backs from sophomore slumps are a real thing. That step forward in year 2 is a real thing. We have no idea. No idea. I do think that, I don't think Calvin Austin's in a sophomore slump if we're going to be, and this is his 3rd year, so he can't be in a sophomore slump. But Broderick Jones certainly is. I think Joey Porter at times is. Keanu Benton's playing really well as of late, which is good to see. Again, that's like a real thing in the NFL. I don't know what happens. I think that your body, it's such a change, and your body goes through such a change. Like you get bigger, you're working differently, where it helps, but it's also an adjustment period. And I think that's it. You come in from college, your rookie season, and you're doing all the same things. You're just doing more of them, and everything's just faster. You're a sophomore, you're changing everything. You have to adjust to what has changed. And I think that contributes to it. But I don't ever judge a rookie class for 3 years.
Let's jump down to Wilson. Appreciate you. Wilson says, y'all have my dream job, which is reporting on the Steelers. How do I get a job like this? I'm in college and majoring in journalism. Love y'all's content. #fire Tomlin.
Oh, man. Yeah, shout out Wilson, man. I appreciate it. Keep grinding. That's awesome. And, my best advice for you, especially if you're in college, which is the best thing, to be doing right now the best thing to be doing right now is just to write, to do everything you can to find every opportunity you can to get your name on publications. Doesn't matter if you're writing for free, if you're creating your own blog, if you're doing your own podcast, it doesn't matter. Do as much as you possibly can. I was writing sometimes 10, 15 stories a day while I was in college. And even in high school, I would write 4 or 5 a day for a long time. You just got to grind. Put your name out there as much as humanly possible. That is going to grow your audience and eventually get some eyes on some people that, you want them to be looking at your stuff.
Let's go over to Marlon Lewis. Appreciate you jumping in. Marlon says, is this collapse good enough for Mike T to have a sense of urgency on the offensive side of the ball?
I don't know if Mike Tomlin knows what sense of urgency is, to be very honest. I will say that I think it's a combination of Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith. I'm no longer very high on what Arthur Smith has done this season. I don't expect a sense of urgency. Again, I don't think it's like light a fire under your ass issues. I think it's actual. The Steelers are not built for this issues that are emerging. You don't have the wide receiver core capable of handling the playoffs. You don't have the offensive line capable of handling good defenses. Your running game is just above average, and that was supposed to be the best thing on your team offensively, and your quarterback isn't getting it done. I look at it like that. I don't look at it, play calling has been rough, but I think execution, I think capabilities are the issues with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, to say, I just don't know if they have the talent. And I think that it's coming to light, especially when George has, games like he had against Cincinnati that bring up questions of like, is he capable of playing in the cold? Because this is twice now.
Let's jump to Miguel, who says Tomlin loyalists are scared and sadly happy to revel in his mediocrity.
I mean, yeah, they probably are. There are a lot of people that just defend Mike Tomlin. And I think Mike Tomlin's a great head coach. My thing is that I just don't know if Mike Tomlin's a great head coach in the city of Pittsburgh right now. And I don't know if Mike Tomlin will ever be a contender in the city of Pittsburgh again. And because of that, I don't know if he's the man for the job. The Steelers are built where if you're not flawless, you're not good, because they don't have the excess talent. They don't have the quarterback. They don't have the depth. Like the Steelers are we just did enough, and we have a coach that is just good enough to get us everywhere we need to be to look good. But Tomlin is probably a coach that excels better with a group that is dominant, so that he could just motivate that domination, send them on their way, maybe make a mistake or two during the game coaching wise, and be able to recover from it. The Steelers don't have any room for that. And because of it, you got to wonder if it's a Steelers Tomlin thing, or maybe a Steelers roster Tomlin thing.
Let's jump over to Mike, who says defenses know that Russ is a long ball or dump off guy, and that's the issue.
It 100% is. 100% is. And the issue there is Russ is a long ball or dump off guy, and every time he tries to throw it anywhere else, he's looking at guys like Van Jefferson and Michael Pruitt trying to catch the football. And that is just not a formula for success. Pat Freiermuth looked great against the Bengals. Shout out, Nick. That could work. If you had more Pat Freiermuths, if you had another George Pickens, if you utilized Calvin Austin differently, I think it could work. But he just doesn't have anybody to have that medium comeback. This is where you need Deontay Johnson. He has none of that. And it doesn't even allow him to try. And I don't think he's got faith in those guys. I wouldn't have faith in those guys. And I just think it's a combination of everything that is just becoming very predictable with Russell Wilson.
Let's jump to Red Hot Chili Peppers fan who says, when are we going to see the end of Mike Tomlin's era? I don't want to start wearing a paper bag.
I would say as of right now, and I said this when Mike Tomlin signed his extension, if Mike and the Steelers don't win a playoff game this season or the next 3 years after, I would believe that is the time that the Steelers move on and say, we've done all we could. It is time to regroup and figure some things out. I don't think it'll come earlier than that. I have no expectation that it'll come earlier than that. And if they win a couple of playoff games in between that, don't have to win a Super Bowl, just got to look good, I bet you he gets a contract extension. But if he doesn't win a playoff game for the next 4 years, this year included, I think he's gone.
Let's jump to Demetrius, who says, now it's Arthur Smith. He's limited with plays with Russ since Tomlin loves old washed quarterbacks. Let's trade Tomlin to the Jets for Garrett Wilson and a 3rd round pick.
I'll say this. Garrett Wilson would be awesome. I still don't think Garrett Wilson's worth Mike Tomlin. I just don't. I think you could get so much from Mike Tomlin. So much. Like Sean Payton didn't coach for 4 years. Came back, got traded for a 1st round pick. Tomlin's never had a losing season. You're telling me that Shaka Khan, or is that his name? And what's the guy's name in Jacksonville? Who's the owner of the Jacksonville?
Shad Khan. I don't think
Shad
it's Shaka
Khan.
Khan.
Yeah, Shaka Khan might be a player. Shad Khan, you're telling me that he wouldn't love Mike Tomlin? He wouldn't just be like, we're never gonna lose. This is awesome. I mean, and look at guys like Andy Reid, who had success in Philadelphia. It ran dry. They fired him. He went to Kansas City, became the best coach in football by a long shot. And I think that's a possibility with Mike Tomlin, and somebody somewhere would take a chance on that. I think you get more than Garrett Wilson. I think you get Garrett Wilson in a 1st round pick. We're going to be especially from the Jets. I mean, that's not even, first off, they don't have a GM, so it's just Woody Johnson making the phone call. And it's probably Woody Johnson's 18-year-old son making the phone call, saying, do it, pull it, let's go. Let's get him over here. He's the best. I mean, I bet you get Garrett Wilson. You might be able to get like Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Breece Hall, and a 1st. Working with, what's his name? Brody?
Let's go over to Vibing with the Dogs, who says, how come we never use Fields on a QB sneak? Are the QB sneaks with Russ, or our QB sneaks with Russ have been awful? I
believe, and I know it's like, oh, who cares? Like, you got to put your body on the line. I understand that point of view. But the sense I get, things I have heard and, from talking to a number of people is that it's very difficult for Justin to just go out there for a play, to say, hey, you've been standing on the sideline in 20-degree weather for the last 40 minutes, go in there and get hit by 300-pound men and try to make something happen. I've been told that is, it looks great on paper. It is very difficult to do with no warm-up or no anything. So I would guess that comes into play. The fact that the Steelers are like it's definitely a risk to toss that guy out there. And while, yeah, it's maybe in the playoffs, it's different. You have a different mindset. Before the playoffs, the mindset is if we lose Justin, we're setting ourselves up to, if we lose Russ, it's Kyle Allen trying to win us a Super Bowl. And that ain't, I mean, it's done. It's over. You've given up. So I think that has a lot to do with why Justin hasn't come in those moments.
Let's go over to Loswald, who says, Noah, I know we talk about how much pull Tomlin has, but how much say will Khan have when it comes to this offseason with staff and quarterback decisions? Can we rely on him to get Fields back in the building?
I think Omar Khan and Art Rooney are the potential saving graces to get Justin Fields back in the building, because I don't think Mike Tomlin's going to fight for Justin Fields to come back. I think he's going to fight for Russell Wilson to come back. And Omar Khan and Art Rooney might be the two that say, yeah, dude, I think we should re-sign Justin. I think that might be a better move long-term, more affordable option than re-signing Russell Wilson. So I don't know how much pull he's going to have in the situation. I have no idea. I'm sure it'll be some. I hope it's enough to make a case that is going against what Tomlin's saying.
Let's go over to Jonathan, who says, Noah, what do you think about Tyreek Hill in the black and yellow?
I think that would be awesome. I think it would be awesome. Now, my only issue there is, and again, he's played in Kansas City, and it's cold in Kansas City. But my only issue is Pittsburgh is frigid, and he's coming from Miami, where Miami's offense don't really do much in the cold. So I mean, I would love it. You'd have to figure out the contract situation. I think it'd be great as long as you could get him for cheap. I don't know if you're going to be able to get him for cheap, but if you could figure all that out, I mean, who wouldn't want Tyreek Hill?
Marlon says, wasn't that the how bad does Russ have to play to be benched game, or does he have to be worse?
No, I'm so glad you asked this question. I was thinking about it all morning, and I was thinking, we don't have time to fit it in and go on this rant, so hopefully somebody asks. I said it when Russ started. Everybody asked me, what does it take for Justin Fields to get back into the starting lineup? What has to happen? And I said, the Steelers have to be on the verge of missing the playoffs, and Russell Wilson has to be the clear problem. Russell Wilson is a clear problem, not the clear problem, a clear problem amongst many problems. But the Steelers made the playoffs, and that's where things went wrong. Is if this was 2 weeks ago and the Steelers were the Bengals and they needed to win out to make the playoffs, and Russ is on a 4-game skid and it looks bad, Justin's your starting quarterback in week 17. But the fact that the Steelers made the playoffs gave them every excuse to ride this one out with Russ. And because of that, that was not the how bad does Russ need to look to get benched game.
Let's go over to Pittsburgh Hornets, who says, what do you expect to see changes-wise from the last time the Steelers played the Ravens, and what adjustments do you think Tomlin makes, if any?
I don't know if adjustments are made, to be very honest. I don't know if adjustments are made. I will say, because again, it's not like hey, you're doing this wrong. Hey, this play call is bad. Like, it is just pure execution. Now, don't get me wrong. The Steelers offense is a high school football, we run pitches and slot fades offense. That's all they do. And it's 85% of their playbook. But I don't know if there's adjustments to be made. I don't. I would imagine you see a little bit more Mike Williams, a little bit more Calvin Austin, who disappeared in that game, and hopefully a little bit less Van Jefferson. But I don't think anything else changes for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Let's skip down to Jason. Appreciate you. Jason says, I think Calvin Austin III deserves more opportunities.
Way more opportunities. Calvin Austin should be the wide receiver 2 headlined in games like this where George is not catching the football. It should be Calvin Austin all day. Instead, he disappeared. He finished the game the other day. I don't even think he had a catch. He didn't. No catches, 1 target. That's atrocious. Like, what do you do? That's as bad as it gets. You have to be able to include this guy because he is a playmaker, and the Steelers just don't.
Let's go over to Marlon, who says, would Russ be open to coming back as a backup?
I don't believe so. I don't think he would. I think he'll get an opportunity to be a starter somewhere. There are not enough quarterbacks in the NFL draft right now to say that he wouldn't. Like, teams are, Carson Beck's no longer a first-round quarterback. Jalen Milroe might go like middle to late at the end of the first round, but there's going to be 2 guys in the top 10 that, from what I've been told, like, are not good. I I've been told that the Steelers' evaluation of these guys, which isn't deep, like they don't, they're doing it, but they understand they're not going to get that pick, is not a first round grade on either one of them. So I don't believe that it's a very quarterback heavy situation in the NFL as a whole. Sam Darnold's probably going to sign somewhere if he doesn't go back to Minnesota. And Russ is probably going to be the second biggest name to get a shot somewhere. And there will be teams that want him.
Let's jump to Jermaine, who says, at what point do we look at ownership? Is it true ownership doesn't want to pay for better coordinators?
No, that's not the case. I mean, Arthur Smith was the best coordinator on the market this offseason. Just because it didn't work out doesn't mean that they made a mistake there. Like, Arthur Smith was the name, made perfect sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers, had a ton of success in Tennessee at that position. I get it. He got fired as a head coach, but that doesn't mean anything. In the NFL, that almost never translates to saying, oh, you're going to be a bad coordinator. Most times it's the other way around. Oh, you're not built to be a head coach because you're just such a good one-minded, you could run an offense type of guy. So I think Arthur Smith is a great hire that just hasn't panned out. When it comes to TA, that's a Tomlin thing. It's always been a Tomlin thing. You're not going to get a real defensive coordinator in Pittsburgh. And I love Terrell Austin. I think Terrell Austin's a genius who does not control the defense. He does not call the defense. That's Mike Tomlin. So it's got nothing to do with ownership at that point either. It's got everything to do with the fact that you're not going to get a Brian Flores because Brian Flores wants to run his own defense. You can't do that in Pittsburgh. It's Mike Tomlin's defense.
I will push back on one thing you said. You said Arthur Smith was the top name. I'll say he was the most known name on the offensive. Name? I would say you could put Kubiak up there. I would say
Kubiak was a good one. But he hasn't panned out. He looks worse than Arthur Smith.
Okay, in New Orleans, where they had the most man games lost on their offense than anybody in the NFL, but also I'd say Zach Robinson, taking a chance on some of these guys could have offered higher reward. Wait, doesn't this sound like the quarterback position? But instead, they wanted the guy with the proven track record. But I'll rest my case on that.
I agree with that, but I also think like this was not a. I agree. I think Kubiak was the name to go get. Zach Robinson, I think less of an argument, but I agree with Kubiak 100%. But I'd still think Arthur Smith was not a, like if people were disappointed about hiring Arthur Smith at the time, like how much farther did you need to get than Ryan Tannehill in the AFC Championship game? Like that was as good as it got,
Yeah, I mean, what was that, 5 years ago?
Yeah,
Same conversations we're having with Tomlin. How much further did you need to get than the AFC Championship in 2016? It's like, well, it is 2024. So
I agree. I don't disagree.
Let's go over to Kerry Taylor, who says, guys, what is the formula for the Steelers to return to the standard of going to the Super Bowl and actually winning?
I think you got to fill the holes. I mean, it starts with quarterback. You got to get a quarterback, but I think you got to fill the holes. You got to develop your offensive line. You have to, which I think the pieces are there. You have to develop your offensive line. You have to get actual wide receivers. You got to replace some of these guys on defense that just don't meet the standard. And there are a couple of them. I'm not going to sit here and just call everybody out one by one, but the fact that you're constantly rotating your defensive tackles of who's active and who's not active probably says that you don't have the depth at your defensive line that you would like to have. Corners the same way. Although Corey Trice played really well against Jamar Chase. I get it, he gave up an easy touchdown, but he played for a guy that was on an island with Corey Trice and gave up 10 receptions for 96 yards. Like for Jamar Chase, that's pretty damn good. And for a guy who's playing his fifth NFL game. Yeah. That's not a bad place to be. But I think that it starts there. You want to get back to the standard, have a roster that it's been a long time since the Pittsburgh Steelers have had a roster that you feel really good about, a complete roster. And I think that's where it starts.
Let's go over to Sajan, who says, Noah, considering the Steelers have not won a playoff game since I was a freshman in college, how are you guys planning to spend the offseason?
So you want to hear something cool? Me and the wife actually planning a cross-country drive. That's going to be our big one. But my brother gets married this offseason. It's going to be a good time. That being said, New Orleans is, probably not the most exciting place to be right now. And it's it might be a little depressing to go there.
For good reason.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, it hasn't a joke. It's a depressing, bad place to be right now. I'm not gonna rule myself out of being there until the Steelers rule me out of being there.
All right, let's go over to Yinzer Joe, who says, why didn't Tomlin move Porter over to cover Chase after Higgins went out? Trice was no match for Chase and ultimately was the scoring difference.
I wish I had the answer to that one because it made no sense to me. None. I got it. T. Higgins and Joe Burrow are Joey Porter, excuse me, are a much better matchup. But it's T. Higgins not. I mean, there's nobody else that's a matchup for Joey Porter Jr. He shadows everybody else. Go shadow Jamar Chase. I didn't get that one at all. But again, I don't call the defense. Mike Tomlin does.
Let's go to Pittsburgh Hornets, who says, why aren't we seeing more of Mike Williams? His catch was amazing last week.
Yep. Again, I wish I had the answer. Now, I don't think Mike Williams does that all the time. I really don't. But I do think there are a lot more moments of good quality Mike Tomlin plays. And if the Steelers' offenses throw the football up in the air and hope somebody comes down with it, it's a better option than Van Jefferson. So put him on the field. I don't think it changes much, but it certainly makes more sense to have that guy playing football.
Let's skip down to Jason, who says, thoughts on Peyton Wilson's season this far?
I think he looks like a third-round rookie. There are moments of Peyton Wilson looks really good, and there are moments of Peyton Wilson's a step off. And I don't judge that. Again, I look at rookies and say, you have just walked into a brand new game, and how are you going to do? He's a late third-round rookie. The expectations shouldn't be that high. Nobody should look at that's Darnell Washington. You know, nobody looked at Darnell and said, why are you not the greatest tight end of all time? You looked at it and said, that's a third-round pick. Good pick. Good pick in the third round. Shout out, you know, Nick Herbig last year. If Peyton Wilson's making plays from time to time, which he is, I'm very comfortable with that. So I would say he looks exactly where he should be, which is not an every down starter, but I think he's very much so showing that he's got potential to develop into that.
Let's go to Vibin with the Dog says, do you see Roman Wilson or Cole Holcomb in the playoffs?
I do. From what I've actually been told, Cole Holcomb's got a real shot to come back this week. Like a real could make it happen on Friday, play in a football game Saturday shot, which is wild. But I mean, shout out Cole, man. Good for you. That just proves how hard he worked. Roman, I think there is literally a 0% chance Roman Wilson comes back this season.
Let's go over to Pittsburgh Hornets, who says, question, I asked this at the beginning of the year, but if you had to bet the house, who would you pick to advance in the playoffs first? The Pirates, the Penguins, or the Steelers?
The Penguins. You don't know why? Because the NHL playoffs right now is a dumpster fire. So shout out the Pens. I'm going Penguins.
I think I'd still go with the Steelers on this one. You have to win
10
7
years?
games. Might be. It might.
Dude, 7 games against the Buffalo Sabres could be a thing.
No, it couldn't be a thing. The Penguins might get in, but they're not going to face anybody the caliber of the Buffalo. First of all, the Buffalo Sabres haven't been in the playoffs since.
They're in the running right now.
Grade.
They're in the bracket right now, though, I'm pretty sure. Or just outside of it.
They're just outside, but so are the Penguins. The Penguins are going to end up playing a top team in a division, but I digress on that point. But I think that it might be a wait regardless. And honestly, the answer would be the Pirates if they opened up their wallet at all. But again, different conversation for a different podcast. Let's go to Dion, who says it's been run, pass, punt in the majority of opening drives. How likely is it we see something different and more aggressive this Saturday?
I mean, Mike Tomlin's rule of thumb is 2 is a trend. 17 is a guarantee almost. Yeah. That's rule of thumb. I mean, it's the most predictable thing in the world to run, pass. That's the Steelers offense, or run, pass, run. Like it doesn't matter. That's what they do. You are going to run the football on first down in Pittsburgh. It's the easiest. If DraftKings Sportsbook wanted to lose money, they would allow you to bet on the next play. And every first down, you would win so much money betting the house on run by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, I mean, it's the easiest call in the book. Run, pass, or run, pass, run. First down is a run, and I don't think it's going to change.
Let's jump to Jason again. Appreciate you, Jason. Says, very happy with Herbig's season. How do you evaluate him? His splash plays are hard to ignore.
Yeah, I think Herbig's looked awesome. And I expect that partnership with him, Alex Highsmith, and TJ Watt to continue to grow next season to the point where it really is like a true 3-man rotation. I think his injury kind of dampened that a little bit. It took him a week or two to get back into the rhythm of things, but he looks great. As a second-year guy who's 23 years old, he looks phenomenal. So Herbig's got so much potential. I get when you say these things, everybody brings up next, like, well, you get rid of Alex Highsmith. No, you don't. Alex also looks phenomenal. I look at it and say very clearly, this is what you do. You run a 3-man outside linebacker rotation almost all the time, and you put 3 of them on the field as much as you possibly can. And, I think that's got so much potential, especially for a line that lacks depth.
Let's finish it off with Nicolo, who says, would you have gone for it on 4th down before the end of the first half?
I would have. Okay. I would have. I don't know if I would have got it, but to be very honest, if I was the Pittsburgh Steelers at this point, I'd be playing back against the wall, desperate football, and just hoping for the best, because that's how at that point, this is how teams win, is desperate football. And the Steelers don't play desperate football. They play white flag football, and it doesn't work. So I would have. I understand the argument against it, but I would have. I don't think, of all the crazy Tomlin things in the last 4 weeks, I don't think that one tops my list.
I'll say this. Tomlin summed it up perfectly when he said, if you can't get 1 yard when you need it, you don't deserve to win the football game. It's like, well,
exactly. So my thing is, I wouldn't have called the play. I wouldn't have called that play. It was way too obvious. I'm quarterback sneaking it, pushing it for days. Like, taking 3 yards, going 3 yards back to hand the ball off to Jaylen Warren on a clear running play where there are 11 guys in the box. Like, no, I'd go shotgun if possible and hand it to Jaylen Warren and get some downhill momentum for that 1 yard, or I would push it. Those would be my 2 options. But under center run, like behind Broderick Jones and Spencer, or at the time it was Mason McCord. What are we doing? What it doesn't no, that I wouldn't have done.
At least it wasn't a toss play, but that's going to do it for today.
100%. All right. With that said, guys, we are heading out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.